regularly scheduled program will not be seen, so that we may bring you the following special presentation. Tonight, a Commitment 2014 special, brought to you by WMUR in partnership with the New Hampshire Union Leader and the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, the Granite State Debates. This evening, the 2nd Congressional District candidates.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to night number 2 of our Granite State Debates. I'm Josh McKelvin. After hearing from the candidates in the 1st Congressional District last night, tonight we head to the 2nd CD for a little geography. That includes Nashua, Concord, as well as western and northern parts of the state. Now let's have a look at the candidates. Congresswoman Anne Kuster is serving her 1st term in Washington. She lives in Hopkinton and was an adoption attorney before being elected. She is married and has 2 children. Her challenger, Republican Marilinda Garcia. She lives in Salem and is serving her 4th term as a state rep. She is currently engaged and is a classical musician. Now, we've asked the audience to hold their applause throughout the evening, except for right now. Audience, please welcome the candidates. All right, let's have a look at the guidelines for tonight's debate. You'll each get 1 minute to respond to the questions, 30 seconds for follow-ups as needed, or if we want to follow up to stay on topic, they may happen as well. We're going to have 1 round of candidate-to-candidate questions and a question or 2 coming from our viewers as well, but most of the questions will come from either myself or the panel. Tonight, that panel includes Tim Buckland of the New Hampshire Union Leader, James Pindell from WMUR Political Scoop, and Kathleen Ronayne from the Associated Press. So, with the introductions now out of the way, let's go to Kathleen Ronayne with our first question directed to Congresswoman Kuster.
Voter accessibility has been an issue in this race. Congresswoman, you've been criticized for not holding public town halls or unscripted public events. How do you respond to that charge?
Well, first off, thank you, Kathleen. And I respond by saying I'm delighted to be here at WMUR, and thank you to all of you for hosting a debate. We had a televised debate last week, and we've got several other forums. I've been very accessible to voters, actually, over the 2 years that I've been in office. In fact, we have one of the most engaged districts in the country, and I've been going to voters, doing open town hall style meetings at their place of work, in the community, and throughout this campaign. They're different a little bit than the sort of publicity stunt style that my opponent has chosen, where the people are screened for the events and the questions are screened. Ours are open and they're more accessible, and I find it a great way to communicate with voters.
Ms. Garcia, take a moment to respond to the publicity stunt style town halls that your opponent alleges.
Sure. Thank you, Josh, for hosting and the IOP. I would say that it's pretty clear if one word characterizes Anne Kuster's time in Congress, it's been absence. She's been absent in accessibility in New Hampshire, and she's been absent in leadership in D.C. And the lack of town halls, not a single one during her entire term, is a perfect example of that. I've hosted many, and as I told her before, what I do is only screen out her trackers, the people she sends after me with video cameras. But otherwise, I've been talking to constituents across the district, and it's really important that as a representative, we're accessible and we listen.
All right, let's go back to Kathleen with a follow-up question.
Ms. Garcia, speaking of absence, as a state representative, you missed hundreds of votes, roughly 22% over your 8 years in office. So how can voters be sure that your attendance will be better if you're elected to Congress?
Sure. I did serve 4 terms, 8 years, and the votes I did miss, in fact, were entirely average in terms of what most people in our volunteer legislature, it's a citizen legislature, tend to do. We all work other jobs and do the best we can to be there all the time. A greater concern, though, is Representative Kuster, who always claims to support seniors and veterans. During the VA scandal, which was the largest scandal to rock that Veterans Department in our history, during that, she was absent from 40% of the hearings on her own committee. She serves on the Veterans Affairs Committee. So if she wants to criticize me about missing some votes in the New Hampshire legislature, I'd like to hear her answer for her only job, which was to be our Congresswoman.
Congresswoman Kuster, take 30 seconds.
Sure, absolutely. And it's just not just a handful of votes that Ms. Garcia missed. Frankly, in 2010, she missed 56% of the votes. And I can't imagine why the voters would want to give her a promotion. I've been commuting back and forth every single week to Washington, D.C., and I have one of the highest attendance rates in Congress. I attended every single event and hearing that we had in the Veterans Affairs Committee, and I'm very proud of the work that our bipartisan committee did to reform the Veterans Affairs. That's the kind of work I'm going to do, is bring people together to get things done. It's what I've been doing for 2 years in Congress and what I'll continue to do, rather than the polarized and, frankly, as you said, absent Ms. Garcia.
Okay, we're gonna move forward now with the next question coming from Tim Buckland, certainly an issue of the day, coming from the union leaders. Tim Buckland, go ahead.
Okay. Ms. Garcia, given that no Americans have died of Ebola, is the disease a legitimate threat in the United States? Or is the situation exaggerated or being exploited for political gain because we're in an election year?
I would say it is a threat because it has the potential to have devastating effects. I think what's been clear is that when I talk to people around the state, they say, you know what, I don't feel safe in my own country anymore. If it's not the threat of international terrorism or the problems with our debt and our lack of development and energy, when it comes to the potential of a pandemic, they're just looking for leadership and common sense decisions from their leaders. So the president's been waffling back and forth. I think a travel ban, as other countries have done, would make sense to those Western African countries. We should be controlling who is going in and out of our country and under what auspices. And I think when it comes to Ebola, why take the chance?
Ms. Kuster, the same question for you.
Absolutely. We want to reassure people that they're safe here at home. And I think Governor Hassan's initiative today with the protocol on monitoring, I agree on the travel ban. I don't think that we need to be issuing visas for folks coming from the 3 countries in West Africa, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia. But I don't think that we want to do anything to harm our ability to eradicate the epidemic right at its source in West Africa. And so that's why I really appreciate the steps that Governor Hassan is taking so that our healthcare workers can go use their expertise and make sure that we eradicate this at its source.
Let's follow up on that. You mentioned the steps the governor is taking. Ms. Garcia, we have a couple of New Hampshire folks on the front lines, or will be on the front lines fighting this. Dr. Elizabeth Talbot from Dartmouth. She's going to Liberia in just a couple of weeks to help out there. Brigadier General Peter Corey of the New Hampshire National Guard. He's been there since last month, helping coordinate the military's role. Governor Hassan announced that they will be self-quarantined for 21 days when they arrive home. Do you believe that that's enough, or should this be a mandatory quarantine?
I think quarantine is important, but the greater question is, at a time when potentially we're overextending our military, why is it we're sending them there when Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, the president of Liberia's son, who is a doctor, is here in Atlanta, Georgia, as well as the great majority of doctors from Liberia? They say that their time would be better served here. So I wonder, why aren't they stepping up to help in their country? And perhaps we can help send aid, and I appreciate all of those that volunteer their time and expertise to go. But I'm concerned about 4,000 troops.
But yes or no on the mandatory quarantine?
I think that would be a good step.
Congresswoman Kuster, same question for you.
I think the quarantine that they've already agreed to will be sufficient, and I appreciate Governor Hassan going the extra step. If there are people coming back from West Africa who have not been exposed, she's asking them to avoid public gatherings and avoid public transportation. But I think the response from Ms. Garcia is very naive. 10,000 people have died in Liberia and Sierra Leone. This is an epidemic. It's been out of control, and absolutely we need to be a part of ending it, eradicating it at its source. That's what every expert in the field has said, and it's something we need to be on.
All right, let's move forward. Next question coming from James Pindle from our panel, going toward Ms. Garcia.
I think it's Mrs. Kuster, actually, Congresswoman Kuster. This is a pretty historic night. We have, for the first time in state history, a Democratic and Republican nominee who are both women for a major office in the state. And yet, on women's issues, there appears to be some disagreement. So I want to start with you, Congresswoman Kuster. Do you believe that most women receive fair treatment and fair pay at work? And if not, how can that be remedied?
Well, I think it's a critical issue, James, and thanks for bringing it up. In New Hampshire, women earn, on average, 78 cents for every dollar that a male earns for the same work. And I think that's the critical point. I've heard my opponents say in the past that people are different. Well, we have a Constitution, we have an Equal Protection Clause, and I feel very strongly that women should be paid fairly, equally. I also believe in the minimum wage. 2/3 of minimum wage workers are women, and I think that we need to lift everyone up. These aren't just women's issues, James. These are family issues. They go to the crux of our economy, and we need to be growing our economy and giving people greater opportunity.
How about you, Ms. Garcia? Do you think most women receive fair treatment and fair pay at work?
I think women should be allowed to negotiate just as men do for the highest possible pay that they deserve. You know, the Equal Pay Act that actually accomplished something, which is prevent discrimination in wages between men and women, was passed in 1963. I know Representative Kuster's been using the recent version of that as some sort of a political talking point, but the fact is that that study that issue has been based on has been decisively refuted by economists. And when you do take into account the differences in occupation, in education, in job tenure, and hours worked, you find that the wage gap actually all but vanishes. So I support women, of course, having equal pay, or why not more than men, but just naming legislation an Equal Pay Act doesn't necessarily mean it will help. It actually might limit your options in terms of negotiating your salary and flex time options.
Congresswoman Kuster.
Again, just briefly, I think it's naive and inexperienced. I certainly have talked to thousands of women across the state who have experienced this, and I've experienced it myself in the workforce. So I don't think it's something that we're making up, frankly. I know that voters feel strongly about getting paid fairly, and they deserve that, and their families need that.
Ms. Garcia, you want a quick follow-up? Then we got to move on.
Sure. Again, it's been decisively refuted by economists, and when you put in mandates like this, you limit women's options to make decisions about their wage and other issues when it comes to their job. Flex time, part-time, work from home, all of the things that allow our innovative economy and the flexible digital world we're in right now to allow us to wrap our jobs around our lives, which is what my friends want, that's for sure.
All right. We also have some viewer interaction tonight, as we did last night. We want to know what issues that you at home would like to hear about over the next half hour. You can tell us by calling or texting the number that you see on your screen, or voting on our website. During the second half hour of our debate, what topic do you definitely want to hear about during that second half hour? You can decide. Text number 1 if that topic is gun control. Text number 2 if it's about the debt ceiling. Or text number 3 if it's about climate change. We'll get to 1 or 2 of those topics once again in the next half hour. All right, political ads have been flooding the airways for months now, in case you haven't noticed. And tonight we wanted to take a few minutes to look at a few of the claims that each of you are making about your opponent. So let's begin with an ad that Congresswoman Annie Kuster's campaign is currently running.
Garcia would take away a woman's right to choose.
Voted to ban abortions with no exception for rape or incest.
Garcia even supported criminal penalties for doctors trying to save a mother's life.
Ms. Garcia, how do you respond to those charges?
Sure. You know, this ad has been running since she started. She's been outspending me 5 to 1, the Congresswoman and her allies. And the fact is that doctors, including my fiance and my brother, as they told me when they saw this ad, doctors are always authorized to save the patient's life. And of course, when that comes to a pregnant woman, that is exactly the case as well. So it's a scare tactic. It's a distortion. And I understand that she wants to focus on social issues. And so she's made this a centerpiece of her campaign, but the reality is the ad is false, it's misleading, and it's a scare tactic.
Congresswoman Kuster, defend the charges in those ads.
Sure. I was so shocked yesterday when I heard her say this exact same thing on NHPR. We went back, actually, I knew this from the voting record, but today we spent quite a bit of time with your voting record, and the votes are very clear. 2007, 2008, 2012, very, very specific votes that would criminalize the physician abortion, and that's exactly what the basis of the ad is, and no exceptions, rape, incest. And, you know, I guess what troubles me the most, in addition to the credibility issue, frankly, I've been an adoption attorney for 25 years. I have worked with women with unplanned pregnancies all across this state, all across this district. These are the most private, personal decisions, and they shouldn't be made by the state. It shouldn't be the government that comes in to make this decision. And I know that I feel strongly about it, and voters, men and women, all across this district feel the same way.
Ms. Garcia?
Sure. I know you say your career was in advocacy, but we all know it was in lobbying. And for someone,
an adoption attorney.
Yes, you've been a lobbyist for 20 years. I understand that. And, you know, it's interesting that when you talk about women's issues and supporting women, you know, I am a woman, if I need to state the obvious, so the idea that I in some way don't support women is a bit absurd on its face. But secondly, I've always worked with women leadership programs as a GAL for abused and neglected children. So I wonder why you, not only in your political life, but in your personal life, decided to lobby for things like the date rape drug, as we know as roofies. You didn't have to do that. You earned thousands of dollars lobbying for that, and that's not helpful to women at all. That's a great threat to our safety.
Quickly,
if I
Congresswoman,
could,
then we have to go
absolutely.
quickly.
I'm not going to let a charge like that just fly by. Frankly, I think it's far-fetched, and you know it is. It's been proven in the past. And what this was about was I was very proud to work with women and women's advocacy groups to increase the penalties. This was a terrible drug that was being used in our state. And look, I'm just talking about the issues that voters care about. You seem to think that 2% of voters even care about these issues, and I think that's naive, and I think it's unrealistic in terms of people's real lives.
We do have to move on. We want to take a look at another ad. This one's coming from Ms. Garcia's campaign, and here it is.
Kuster has been delinquent on more than $40,000 in property taxes, including on her vacation home. What's her excuse?
Life is expensive.
But when she stopped paying her taxes on time, Kuster was making nearly $200,000 as a lobbyist for big drug companies.
So, Congresswoman Kuster, how do you respond?
Aside from it being not true, the point is, look, our taxes are paid in full, and they have been for several years, and Ms. Garcia knows that. The issues that voters care about in this election are jobs, they're about education, sending their kids to college, and frankly, this is the reason that voters are fed up, are these personal attacks that aren't even true, that have been proven incorrect several years ago. And I think that what voters really want is to hear our positions on issues that matter to them. I know my opponent doesn't want to talk about these issues because she can't defend her position. And I understand that, but I'm just going to keep talking about the issues that matter to the voters, and we'll let the voters decide on November 4th.
Ms. Garcia, the charge is that ad was not true.
It actually absolutely was true. It's 6 times, despite the fact you earned 4 times the New Hampshire average income, and you had 2 homes. It was 6 times that you failed. That's why, by way of an apology, you said life is expensive. Now, I didn't bring up this issue for petty reasons and about personal failings. It's because when I've been around the district talking to people, which is something you haven't been doing, they said to me, you know what? It's not about that she didn't pay her property taxes. It's that she did that while voting to raise my taxes. And people are hurting right now. They can't afford to heat their homes. They can't afford their health care anymore, thanks to your support for Obamacare and the president. They can't afford to fill their cars. So the reason that you're voting to raise their taxes while not paying your own is why this rubs people the wrong way.
And again, incorrect, proven incorrect 2 years ago, and I think we might as well move on to the real issues that voters care about.
I do want to ask a quick follow-up here, though.
Sure.
The reality is both of you have had privileges that other New Hampshire voters have not had in their lives. So I think a lot of them might be wondering, how can either of you, we'll start with you, Congresswoman, relate to the struggles that they're going through now?
Well, and I think it's 25 years in the working world, juggling as families do, two incomes, yes, but 2 children, getting to work, making life work, and I've been working in a volunteer capacity. I've been working in my law firm to really make a difference in real people's real lives. And I think what you're going to find is that my opponent has had a privileged life, and yes, we both have great educations, but let's get to the crux of it. The difference is I want every New Hampshire child to have the education and the opportunity that I've had. And when my opponent says to abolish the Department of Education, how are middle-class families even going to afford afford college? How are they going to afford to get ahead? And it's really going to have an impact on our bottom line and small businesses all across the district.
Ms. Garcia, how can you relate to the struggles people are going through?
I've been very blessed. I've had a wonderful, wonderful life, and I owe that to my parents. My mom was an immigrant. My dad came here from New Mexico. They both went to college. I was born here. My dad's a small business owner, and my mom's a teacher. And I've been a musician. I've traveled the world. I've been to about 40 countries. I've had the ability to volunteer in the state legislature and as a court-appointed special advocate for abused and neglected children, to help out women's leadership programs, to establish a foundation for disadvantaged children in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. I have no question that I've lived a wonderful life. But the problem is that Representative Kuster thinks that she can say one thing and do the other. So when she votes herself to be exempted from Obamacare and foists that on the American people, when she wants stricter standards in education that limit other children's educational opportunities, that's a problem.
Again, Josh, I'm sorry, I can't leave. It's the inaccuracies. I am on the Affordable Care Act. Every member of Congress is on the exchange. And if you don't know that, you should know it.
All right, let's move on now with the next question coming from Kathleen Ronayne for Congresswoman Kuster.
Yeah, we're going to switch it to national security here. On national security, when we think of some of the threats that we're facing today, how do you balance Americans' privacy rights with their personal safety?
Well, look, obviously we do need to be concerned with, and I support restrictions and revisions to the NSA not invading people's personal private lives. I think that's important. I also think that our police and the various law enforcement authorities need to have access to information about criminal conduct in our country. What's different now and what's very nerve-wracking really for people is that we have an enemy that we haven't ever faced before. We have an enemy that is moving amongst us, not in a with a military that you can see from the outside and that we can respond to, but you know, for example, what's happening on computers, what's happening to our economy, what's happening with potential threats from disease and chemical warfare. And so I think you're right, it's a balancing act. I want to make sure that people are safe, and I want to make sure that their privacy is protected to the extent that we can.
Ms. Garcia, same question for you. How do we strike that balance?
Sure. I do agree that this is one of the most difficult and sort of gray areas of public policy. On the one hand, when it comes to cyber terror, that has recently outpaced drug trafficking as the highest dollar criminal activity in the world. Because of that, our retail institutions, our critical infrastructure, our public utilities, and our very government and life are extremely at threat. We have state sponsors of terror, cyber terror in Iran, in Russia, in China, and it's happening all the time. There's a 98% chance that everybody is compromised, every system is. On the other hand, we understand that as Americans, one of our basic rights is of privacy, is of individual liberty. So when it comes to making that decision, I think policymakers have to be very, very careful, and that's something I would absolutely seek to do.
All right, let's go to the next question coming from Tim Buckland, again for Congresswoman Kuster.
Thank you,
Congresswoman Kuster, your colleague, Congresswoman Shea Porter, said last night on this stage that she would not support boots on the ground against ISIS in any scenario. Do you agree?
I do agree, and I think it's irresponsible. I know my opponent has said she doesn't feel we should, quote-unquote, take this off the table. But what's irresponsible is going forward talking about American troops coming in. None of our allies are going to join a coalition if they think that we're going to take the lead. We can't afford in blood or treasure to be the world's police any longer. The first Iraq war was a mistake. We got bogged down in Afghanistan. And look, I serve on the Veterans Affairs Committee, and I have dealt with veterans all over this district. And what I know to be true is that people have suffered from 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 terms overseas, and their families really need help. We've got all of these issues of medical to deal with in our Veterans Affairs, and I just think that we need to support veterans and not get dragged into another bloody war. And I was very surprised by the 2007 vote that my opponent took, where she won't support the veterans, and yet she apparently wants to get us rushing back into another war.
All right, Ms. Garcia, how big a threat is ISIS, and how far should the U.S. go to eliminate it?
Sure. One of the reasons we have trouble working with allies is because due to the lack of leadership from our president and his surrogates like Anne Kuster, the congresswoman, our friends don't believe they're our friends. They don't know that we have their back. And our enemies do not respect us, and they do not fear us. So when it comes to ISIS, which is commonly known to be now one of the greatest terrorist threats in the world, they're the most well-funded. They're taking over oil fields. They have our weapons that we provided to the Iraqis. General Dempsey, Joint Chairman of the Chiefs of Staff, said they right now have tactical momentum, not us. That means we're potentially losing and ISIS is winning. That's very concerning when it comes to our national security. So all I've said is that we should not telegraph to our enemies how far we're not willing to go to protect our national security. So that's why I say keep boots on the ground as an option. Don't tell our enemies that we're not going to go there.
All right, moving forward now. Next question comes from James Pindle.
That's right, Ms. Garcia. Let's revisit a topic that was a big deal in your Republican primary, and that's immigration. During that debate and during that campaign, you talked about a lot of things you were not for, but I'm not sure I get a good sense about what you do support. So what would be your immigration plan?
Sure. The first thing we have to do, and the thing we have to do to not render any other potential reforms completely meaningless, is secure the border. Border security and national security right now go hand in hand. When it comes to international terrorism, when it comes to the fact that, look, if 60,000 children and young adults could just drive over in buses, and then with the threat of pandemics and infectious diseases like Ebola, it's pretty clear that we need to establish our national sovereignty and know who is coming in and out of our country. So that's the first step. Beyond there, we have to look at our visas, we have to look at our legal process, we have to look at what our economic trends are right now and be sure that our immigration system, when it comes to high tech and agriculture, for example, meet our economic needs. But American citizens' rights need to be first, then those going through the process legally, spending years and thousands of dollars doing it the right way are second, and then we need to consider the 11 to 12 million illegal population that's here.
Congresswoman Kuster, where do you see any major policy differences on immigration between yourself and your opponent?
Well, I agree with you, James. I've had a hard time following my opponent's position, and I'm not sure I understand it after that answer. But basically, I support the Senate bill. It was passed over a year and a half ago. John McCain, Kelly Ayotte, Jeanne Shaheen all voted for it. Broad bipartisan bill, and it should have been brought to the floor of the House, but it hasn't because the Tea Party won't let Speaker Boehner let us take a vote. We have a majority. We have 218 votes for it. We have to regularize 11 million people living in our country illegally. We are a nation of laws. And yes, they need to go to the back of the line and pay the fees and pay. Everything needs to happen. But we need to solve this issue. Of course, it's easy to say we need high-tech visas, absolutely. We need farm workers, absolutely. I've worked with the farmers and the agricultural workers in the state. But we need to regularize, and we need to bring that bill to the floor of the House.
All right, we're going to move forward now. So over the past couple of weeks, we've been asking viewers of WMUR and readers of the Union Leader to send in some of their questions, ideas, and we've also asked if they want to ask them in person. Someone decided they wanted to. So for that, let's send it over to Jennifer Vaughn.
And I have him right here next to me. Thank you, Josh, and good evening to the candidates. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Richard Moore, who lives in Chichester, and he's asking the question of you both tonight. And Congresswoman Kuster, please take first response.
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer.
Go ahead, sir.
My question is about Social Security. The large company that I worked for has downsized a lot of its workforce, so a significant portion of my retirement income will be Social Security. So what will you do to preserve Social Security for me and for future generations?
Richard, thank you so much for asking, and I appreciate the question, and it's one that I talk about literally every single day as I go out and about in the district. We've just finished 30 diners in 30 days this week, and this is a topic that comes up repeatedly. Look, I will go to bat for Social Security every single day in Congress. It is one of the most successful government programs we have, and people rely upon it, including my mother-in-law. It is easy to fix. It should be a bipartisan fix. And all we need to do is increase the limit of withholding, and it will be fixed. But my opponent wants to privatize Social Security. That's the vote she took in a resolution in 2012 to quote unquote, privatize all aspects of Social Security. Imagine if we had done that in 2008. Imagine where we would be. People all across the state would have lost everything they needed for their future. So thanks for bringing it up, and I'm happy to be an advocate for Social Security.
Ms. Garcia.
Sure. I'm also happy you brought that up. What's frightening right now is you're concerned, and the Medicare and Social Security Board of Trustees says that, in fact, Social Security is going to be insolvent by approximately 2033. So that means what's going to happen to you, and my generation, frankly, assumes that it just won't be there for us. There are many reforms on the table, and again, I think we have to have an open mind and consider all of them, however, preserving those 55 and above from any changes. But the thing is, aside from worries about Social Security, because frankly, the Congresswoman has failed to act, she's also chipping away at your Medicare. She supports Obamacare, which raids Medicare to the tune of $716 billion. There's going to be thousands of people, seniors, kicked off their plans in New Hampshire in the coming years, and you're going to see cuts for approximately at $3,000 by 2017 to your Medicare Advantage. So you have two great worries, and the Congresswoman, again, has had an absence of leadership on both fronts.
I've got to respond to that, Josh. This $716 billion number is another one of these tired Tea Party talking points that keeps coming out. What that number is about is double billing, so it's savings. And I'm shocked, actually, that you would want to continue fraud and abuse of our system and double billing that's costing the taxpayer $716 billion when that money could go to secure Medicare and make sure that Richard here has his Social Security and his Medicare, and he can rely upon it. And that's what I want for all, and I'll work hard for it every single day.
Ms. Garcia, take 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, in fact, I think it's just something where you're in Washington, you count a saving as some sort of non-cut. The fact is that it does affect seniors, and the reality on the ground is premium increases go up, plans are lost, people are separated from them, their doctors, their prescription coverage, and the like. That's why the Wall Street Journal said New Hampshire suffered some of the most adverse effects of Obamacare. And if you were talking to people around the district more, you would understand that too.
All right, thanks very much to Mr. Moore and Jen for helping us out from the audience. All right, now feels like a good time for a lightning round. Okay, sure. Take a sip of water because the next question is coming. All right, first one, we'll go to Ms. Garcia first. Should there be term limits in Congress?
I think term limits are a very well considered idea. The problem I've always had is that when it comes to the Congress, I'm not sure exactly what is an appropriate time limit. I would say, maybe 12 years, 10 years, 14 years. I'm not sure, but I do agree with the sentiment that people shouldn't be in office as a job, as a career for many, many years.
All right, fair enough. Same question to you, Congresswoman.
Well, I think if people don't show up, they should be limited, and I think that's what the voters do. So November 4th, people can make that decision. I think that people know in their hearts who's working hard for them, and that's why we have elections.
So yes or no, do you believe that Congress should have
No, I
term
don't
limits?
think we need them because we have term limits every 2 years when the voters make a decision, and I'm just simply saying I've showed up to do my job.
Which brings me to my next lightning round question. Is 2 years enough, congressional term enough to be an effective legislator, do you think?
Well, look, for me, I'm just getting started, and I think, in 2 years, I'm very proud of the bills that we passed, the bipartisan Veterans Reform Act that came out of my committee, the bipartisan Farm Bill that came out of my committee. These are important bills, and it's difficult. It's the most dysfunctional Congress ever with Speaker Boehner at the helm, and it's the Tea Party that's dragging us down, and the last thing we need is more Tea Party votes in Congress.
Ms. Garcia, 2 years enough?
Well, I think it's clear if we use Congresswoman Kuster as an example, it's definitely not enough because she hasn't accomplished anything in D.C. to solve a lot of the problems we've talked about today, and then she also hasn't been here on the ground in New Hampshire, not a single town hall to listen to your constituents.
And you're still not correct, but you could keep trying it.
All right, we're going to ask you.
I will.
It's kind of a state issue, but you're both New Hampshire residents, so we're going to ask it to you. What do you think about Colorado and Washington's decision to legalize recreational marijuana? And do you believe, Ms. Garcia, we'll start with you, that New Hampshire should look at the possibilities?
I don't support legalization. in the state, when it came through the state legislature, I did support decriminalization because I do think we have a problem with prison overcrowding, but straight out legalization is a concern, especially since the people, for example, with cancer and health reasons that are looking to alleviate pain, they, for some reason, have to go through a bureaucracy to access medicinal marijuana. So I don't think legalization for recreational purposes would be fair.
Congresswoman Kuster?
Again, I think it's a state issue, and I support the state's decision so far on this decriminalization, and I think we'll learn a lot from these other two states, and then the state legislature can decide.
Personally, how do you feel about legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes?
This may be the one thing with our blue jackets and this issue that we agree on.
All right. Right now, the Department of Transportation in New Hampshire is examining, along with a lot of legislators, the possibility of a rail project to connect parts of the 2nd District. Is this a proposal that you support, Congresswoman Kuster?
Absolutely. Not only support, it's one that I've been working very hard with the people of Nashua. In fact, I was delighted to be a part of the Nashua Chamber of Commerce discussion on this. We're waiting for a report now that my opponent opposed. In fact, frankly, she voted to abolish the committee that even does the report. And I just feel very strongly that this is something that will bring economic development throughout the Southern Tier and throughout New Hampshire. And I'm very, very excited about it.
Ms. Garcia, what do you think about a rail project?
In fact, what I did was vote to be sure that we first did a cost-benefit analysis. So that's the study we're awaiting to find out if this is feasible economically. My concern is that for political reasons, Representative Kuster even did a press conference supporting this before the feasibility study has even come out. So if we're considering a $200 million project that involves Massachusetts, I want to be sure that Massachusetts isn't going to be leaving New Hampshire taxpayers on the hook for the whole thing. So I think it would be best if we waited to hear from the governor and the legislature to see what the state thinks is a good way to go.
All right,
again, Josh, I can't leave it hanging.
Quickly,
it's a credibility issue. She voted to abolish the committee that did the report.
The bill was amended to a cost-benefit analysis.
All right, since you guys haven't engaged each other at all, we're going to help you out with it. It's time for a candidate-to-candidate question. We're going to start with you, candidate or Congresswoman Kuster. Question for Ms. Garcia.
Sure. Ms. Garcia, you have voted in the New Hampshire legislature to abolish the minimum wage, and you've taken the position that we should abolish the federal minimum wage. And my question is, what would you say to a working mom with 2 kids who is doing everything she possibly can to keep her family together when her wages go down to $4 an hour?
Sure. Here's what I'd say to her. I know that people are struggling right now and they need jobs. What I did in the legislature was vote to abolish the state minimum wage because that just means the federal minimum wage will be the wage that is used. I didn't support raising the federal minimum wage because, again, when I'm out in the district talking to business owners, what they tell me is if that minimum wage is raised, we're going to have to lay people off. And economists have also said that hundreds of thousands of jobs will be lost across the country. That's not what that woman you just referenced needs. That's not what any citizen needs right now because the economy has
how did she get by on $4 an hour?
Excuse me. Thank you. I know you interrupted me approximately 20 times in the last debate, but I think it would be good if you paid attention to the format.
No, I'm just wondering, though. $4 an hour is the question.
Please.
Thank you very much.
The question's $4 an hour. So
I'm
just
sorry.
asking.
So again, I don't support jobs being lost, which is why I would not support raising the federal minimum wage.
Now it's your turn to ask the question of Congresswoman Kuster.
Yes. Recently, you said you claimed to be one of the strongest supporters of the president in the entire U.S. Congress. While campaigning, you stated as a purpose of running for office was to support the president's agenda in Congress. So my question to you is, do you feel you've accomplished that goal?
Well, you seem to think that the president is on the ballot, and he's not, and the voters know that he's not. Look, there are lots of issues that I disagree with the president on, and one of them is the one that I disagree with both the president and you, and that's change CPI. And back to Richard's question about Social Security. You've talked in this campaign that you want to raise the age for Social Security recipients, you want to lower the benefits, and change CPI is just one of those inside the beltway policies that President Obama put out there that I strenuously disagree with, and apparently it's something that you agree with him on. So there are plenty of issues. I voted against my party and I voted against the president, and once again, he's not on the ballot.
I won't interrupt you, but you didn't answer my question. That's fine.
All right, we're going to move forward then with another question. This one coming from James Pindle on our panel.
Thank you very much, Josh. This question goes to Ms. Garcia. You know, we're wrapping up the least productive Congress in American history. And part of the problem, people say, is that Washington is just simply divided between Republicans and Democrats. So can you cite an example, maybe, of your work in the State House where you've shown the ability to work across the aisle to get something done?
Absolutely. One of the initiatives I was involved in while in the state was providing for better health care for more people at a lower cost. And what that meant is allowing for health care to move to a more consumer-oriented, innovative model where we focus on pricing transparency, open data, and insurance claims so the innovation economy can harness that and provide the consumer experience to all Americans. And I was working with hospital administrators, medical professionals, other colleagues, again, on both sides of the aisle. So much to my dismay, we found out that when our federal reps, such as Anne Kuster, aren't supporting New Hampshire efforts that meet our unique problems and challenges here in the state, that's when we have a problem, because you're an adversary instead of a support to your state that she allegedly represents.
Congresswoman Kuster, how about you? A moment when you worked across the aisle to get something done.
Oh, absolutely. And not a moment. This is my entire approach. You know, Congress is broken, as you said, and that's what I said in 2010 when I ran and in 2012 when I ran. And my approach is to bring people together to get things done. You know, I've told the story many times. I'm born bipartisan. I've worked with Republicans and Democrats all my life. A specific example is reaching out to a colleague across the aisle to pass legislation that passed both the House and the Senate and was signed into law to provide whistleblower protection for victims of military sexual assault. My opponent hasn't explained what she would tell the 70,000 people that finally got health insurance when she repeals the health insurance.
Let's move over to the union leaders. Tim Buckland now with the next question.
Thanks, Josh. Congresswoman Kuster, you're on the record in support of the health care law, something that most Granite Staters oppose. When you vote, at what point do your views override your constituents' views?
Well, here's what I'm on the record on. It's to repair, not repeal. And frankly, I was shocked when my opponent doubled down in her Concord Monitor editorial board meeting when they offered her the chance to repeal and replace, and she said, no, just repeal. What I want to do is repair. Obviously, the rollout was a disaster, I'd be the first to say. But what's happening now is 70,000 people have health insurance in New Hampshire. We just learned today that we're going to have over 60 different plans to choose from on the exchange. Prices are going to come down, and we've already seen that in some of the rates that have been recorded coming forward for January for the November 15th sign up, and the quality will improve. Access, we've solved that problem. In the first year, it was very difficult when we only had Anthem and they picked a narrow network. Now we have at least 3 of the providers that are offering coverage for every single facility in the state.
I just want to get to the heart of that question, though.
Sure.
The question was, majority of New Hampshire voters, according to polls, are not in favor of the Affordable Care Act.
They don't, I'm sorry, they don't want to repeal it. I disagree.
Here's the question.
Voters,
just to get to the heart of the question.
Sure.
How do you explain to a voter when the majority of them disagree with you that you know better?
I know, but I'm trying to tell you they don't. And you're misrepresenting to the public what the position is. They do not favor repeal. That's what your polls and every other poll. What they favor is to fix it. And that's what I've been doing. I've taken a series of votes in Congress to fix it, to make sure that we delay it and not have anyone penalized for a program that doesn't work. But what's irresponsible is total repeal and sending 70,000 people out on the street without health insurance. Frankly, the rates are just going to go up for everybody as they have been.
All right, Tim, let's go back to you.
Okay. Ms. Garcia, you're on the record opposing a casino, something that most Granite Staters support, including in your hometown of Salem. Same question for you. When you vote, at what point do your views override your constituents' views?
I think it's a balance of being a representative in terms of doing what the polls show as opposed to using your judgment. The other most important point is that you keep your campaign promises. So I was elected 4 times, and I always said I didn't necessarily support a casino. I was on the Speaker's Special Committee considering it. I talked with everybody that offered opinions on that, and frankly, I looked towards Massachusetts and New Jersey. I don't support it because I don't think it's a sustainable revenue source for the state, and we've seen casinos casinos going bankrupt and taxpayers being on the hook in many other areas. So all I did was keep my campaign promises, and I wouldn't betray those that voted for me knowing that I didn't support a casino.
Next question coming from Kathleen Ronayne for Ms. Garcia.
It's no secret that we're starting to face an energy crunch here. Supply is limited and prices are going up. But right here in New Hampshire, we've seen new projects such as Northern Pass, wind farms, a possible natural gas pipeline through Hollis be quite controversial, to say the least. So what type of energy policy could you get behind that would help lower costs?
It's very true. You know, when I've talked to people around the state, they're worried that they can't afford to heat their homes. And the industry experts say that in the next 5 to 10 years, if New Hampshire and the country doesn't do something, we could face scheduled rolling blackouts. It's very scary. And that's why I support all of the above approach when it comes to development and innovation. And that's why I'm very concerned about the president's obstructionism on the Keystone Pipeline and the Representative Kuster's lack of leadership on that issue. That's something that would create jobs right away, would drive energy prices down, which is important, and allow for greater access. In addition, the president's taken over 100 actions to delay development and exploration and driving up rates across the board.
Congresswoman Kuster, same question for you. What's an energy policy that you would support to help lower prices?
Well, I support renewable energy and the jobs that come from that, it's a win-win-win, less dependence upon foreign oil, which we've seen go down dramatically. Look at the cost of gasoline just dropping dramatically here in New Hampshire, and it's creating new jobs. So I think New Hampshire has fallen behind in terms of solar. I'd like to see a lot more with solar here in New Hampshire, and there are opportunities for that, including a company like Sunrun that will install it. You don't have to own it. They'll own the equipment, and you can simply pay your monthly bill as you would a utility bill. I think we can see a lot more happening, but the gist of your question was really about local control. And I think New Hampshire has a long and very important tradition of local control ever since Aristotle Onassis tried to come into Durham, New Hampshire. And I feel that that's the balance that we have to strike. Northern Pass is a big issue in my district. I listen to the local people about the aesthetics that's important for our tourism. And I think what we need to do is find a balance. Hopefully that project could be done in a way that was not harmful to the environment and yet created jobs. I've now met with the folks in Hollis. I feel the same way. We've got to listen to the local people and make sure that it's not harmful to the environment or the economy.
And we got to watch the clock too. Thank you very much, Congresswoman. Appreciate that. Now, we asked you about 30 minutes ago, you at home, which issue you'd like us to get into in the second half of our debate. We gave you a few options. More than 400 people voted. Here is a look at the results. Most people wanted to hear about gun control or gun laws surrounding gun violence. Let's go to James Pindle for the question on that.
Thanks, Josh. And it makes sense. This district has a big history when it comes to guns. I want to start with you, Congresswoman Kuster, then. What changes, if any, to federal gun laws would you support?
Well, look, Josh, this district has a wonderful tradition, and I feel very, very strongly about supporting the Second Amendment, hunters, and also, frankly, for personal safety. You know, I've talked with a lot of voters around the district about personal safety, and they feel very strongly. I think we've got to have an adult conversation about how to keep our communities safe, and I know we can find common ground. I've talked with lots of gun owners, but look, we've got a situation where families are concerned about sending their children to school or to the mall or to a movie theater. And I think we've got to have a conversation about, you know, who is safe in terms of gun ownership, and are there some people, because of their criminal past, because of the threats that they've made, perhaps stalking and domestic violence cases, where we really need to have some control.
Ms. Garcia, what changes to any federal gun laws would you support, and did you hear anything there you'd like to respond to?
Sure. I think when it comes to more laws, we have to be sure we're enforcing the ones that are already on the books. I think the Second Amendment is a right that is very clearly laid out in our foundational documents, and one of the problems is that as policymakers, and generally for ideological reasons, we're very reactionary, and when there's a crisis or a tragedy, we tend to clamp down on the law-abiding citizens instead of looking at the root causes of what these problems are, be it mental illness, be it problems with substance abuse among our young people. But a greater concern is that Ann Kuster is one of those reactionary politicians. And after a recent tragedy, she just said, you know, she wanted to ban guns. She couldn't tell us why or which ones, but she wanted to put in new controls. And that was reported in our New Hampshire
newspapers. This is not only
newspapers.
revisionist history. Now you're just making things up.
Congresswoman, let her finish making her point, and then you can respond.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congresswoman. So, yes, that's a problem. I think we need to be very, very careful that we're not infringing on the rights of law-abiding citizens and just taking punitive action when it comes to gun laws.
And I agree.
Okay. All right. Let's go to Tim with the next question.
Thanks, Josh. Congresswoman Kuster, you supported reforms at the VA earlier this year. What still needs to be done?
Well, I'm actually very excited about this bill. It came out of our bipartisan Veterans Affairs Committee, which, by the way, one of the only bipartisan committees. And what it's about is making sure that veterans have access to high-quality health care in a timely way. It's actually modeled on a pilot project that we did right here in New Hampshire. When we talked to veterans in the North Country and they had to travel too far, we did two things. One is we opened up new clinics in Berlin and Colebrook, and those will be coming online in the next few months. And then the second is that we started a contract with Concord Hospital for care in a private setting that would be reimbursed by the VA. We are very fortunate to pass that all across the country, and so what needs to happen now is the implementation of that new Vets card, making sure that veterans have timely access to care.
Ms. Garcia, same question.
Yes. One of my concerns with the Veterans Affairs Department, and especially in the light of the recent scandal and disaster that we saw there, is that they're trying to now move the sixth of our economy, our entire healthcare system, to that model, government centralized control. That's a big concern. And again, during the midst of this crisis, the fact that Congresswoman Kuster, who serves on the Veterans Affairs Committee, wasn't there for 40% of the hearings on this important issue is of grave concern. I support veterans being able to, excuse me, Congresswoman. I support veterans being able to go to the hospitals they need to get the care that they desire. And first and foremost, we need accountability and not mismanagement when it comes to the Veterans Affairs Department.
Next question comes from Kathleen Ronayne.
Yeah, turning to an issue that is really important to voters, and that's jobs. Ms. Garcia, what is something that Congress can do to help the American economy create more jobs?
Every time I talk to a business owner, they tell me that the increase in regulations and taxes always going up are one of the biggest impediments to development. They can't hire new workers. They can't invest in R&D. They can't develop a new product because they say, honestly, I can barely keep up with the compliance issues. I was talking to a dentist, a pediatric dentist, who's losing patients because of Obamacare, so that's a concern. But he's also saying that, you know, I have a book about this big that helps me actually do my work as a doctor, and then I have books that are about this big that are regulations that I can barely keep up with. Again, the Obama administration has been absolutely horrific when it comes to new regulations and higher taxes, and the Congresswoman has supported Obama the whole way.
Congresswoman Kuster?
Sure. Thank you so much for bringing it up. It's the #1 issue, and it's too bad we get to it at the very end. Look, this has been my #1 priority, and I've traveled all across the district visiting dozens and dozens of companies with our Congress at Your Company, holding town hall meetings with voters and with people at their place of business. And here's what I've learned. I always ask on these visits, what can the federal government do to help, and what can the federal government do to get out of the way? And the #1 issue right now is education and preparation of our 21st century workforce. So I've introduced legislation to bring together our community colleges with our employers to create new training to fill those jobs for the 21st century. Precision engineering, precision manufacturing is one of the fastest growing. I've also brought the Export-Import Bank here to New Hampshire, and I'm really excited about the opportunities there to grow the markets and help bring everybody up by growing our economy.
All right, we only have time to take a quick breather now before we get to our closing statements, so let's relax a little bit. It's almost Halloween. When our panel comes to your house, Congresswoman Kuster dressed up in their costumes, what kind of candy are they getting?
Snickers.
All right.
No doubt.
Ms. Kuster? I'm sorry, Ms. Garcia.
I'm a big fan of Kit Kats, I have to say.
All right, so both are very, very good answers. Seen any good movies lately?
No, I don't have time because I'm out meeting voters. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, we went to an awesome movie last weekend, The Judge. I highly recommend it.
All right. And lastly, what are you going to be for Halloween, Congresswoman Kuster?
At the rate things are going, a candidate for Congress.
You have a costume plan?
No, I don't.
Wearing it.
All right. All right, we are now at the final portion of our debate. In lieu of the closing statement, as we did last night, we're going to have a closing question, something that isn't really issue-based, more philosophical. We drew the order earlier today, and Congresswoman Kuster will go first. So the question is, this is the first time that two women have faced each other in a congressional race in New Hampshire, in the general election anyway. 2 years ago, the state made history by electing women to all of its top 5 political offices. So the question is, Congresswoman Kuster, did that make any practical difference? If so, how?
Well, thank you, Josh. And this is a tremendous honor, and I want to thank my opponent. It is historic to have two women here, and I really appreciate that. I think, despite a few barbs, I think what women bring that's different is civility and the ability to have a conversation and to explore different policy options. It was a tremendous honor for me, obviously, to be a part of the first ever historical all-female delegation, and we have a woman governor. I should give her a shout out, and a woman chief justice. But look, male or female, what I'm looking for in colleagues in Congress are people who want to bring people together to get things done. That's my background. That's what I've been doing my entire life. Congress is broken. It's too polarized. And what's different about the way I've approached it is to create a group that we call United Solutions, Republicans and Democrats coming together to find common ground. We're not going to agree on everything, but what we need in our leaders is people who will look for a way to move our country forward. So it's great to be a part of this tonight, and thanks again for hosting.
And Ms. Garcia, same question for you. Did having 5 women in our top political offices make a practical difference, do you believe?
I think a broad array of perspective is really important. I'm glad that we have been leaders in terms of our female representation in our elected bodies on the state level and, of course, with our federal delegation. But when I hear from people right now, they're just really concerned about the direction our country's going in, and they don't really distinguish between men or women leaders in terms of their gender. They just want to know that there are people that are there to listen to them, to hear their concerns, and to take action that makes our country safer, that allows for job creation, that reduces the size and scope of government that they feel is intrusive and getting into every aspect of their lives. So that's what I would seek to do as a woman elected official if I were elected to Congress.
And that is going to wrap up our debate for tonight. Candidates, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, panel.
And thank you very much to our panel, indeed, and our audience for being here as well. Appreciate everyone. And our next debate tomorrow night at 7 o'clock, that is the race for governor with incumbent Maggie Hassan and Republican challenger Walt Havenstein. And a reminder that the election information can be found anytime simply by heading to WMUR.com. Look for our politics page. Next Monday at 7 o'clock, also a good one. You can catch up on all the races during a Commitment 2014 election countdown show. We'll be giving you a comprehensive look at all of the candidates as well as the races. But for now, that is going to do it for us. We'll see you back here again tonight at 10 o'clock over on MeTV, and then right back here at 11 o'clock on Channel 9 WMUR. For now, thank you very much and have a great night.
Hello, I'm Jeff Bartlett, General Manager of WMUR TV.
And I'm Todd Fahey, State Director of AARP New Hampshire.
Thank you for watching tonight's debate. We appreciate you taking the time to get to know the candidates a little better.
At AARP, we work to ensure that our 225,000 members and all New Hampshire voters have the opportunity to engage in the political process and have the information they need to make an informed decision. That's why we're pleased to sponsor tonight's debate. On behalf of AARP New Hampshire
and WMUR, thank you for joining us.
Tonight's debate is made possible by the financial support of AARP New Hampshire.
Nabbed, booked, locked up. Case closed? You don't know ARP. Because the AARP Fraud Watch Network means everyone can protect themselves and their families from scams and identity theft. With local alerts, tips from law enforcement, and the inside scoop from former con artists. Real possibilities to stay ahead of the bad guys. If you don't think beat con men at their own game when you think AARP, then you don't know ARP. Find more surprising possibilities and get to know us at aarp.org/possibilities.
Prince Weatherby's Haunted New Hampshire, Halloween night at 7 on WMUR.
I'm Annie Kuster, and I approve this message.
Here's the truth. Annie Kuster paid every penny of her taxes. And here's what Marilinda Garcia is trying to hide. She's the hand-picked candidate of the billionaire Koch brothers, spending over $1 million to elect her. To push an extreme agenda, privatize and cut Social Security, eliminate federal student loans, raise taxes on the middle class while cutting taxes for millionaires. Marilinda Garcia works for them, not us.
It's tough to be middle class today. Food, gas, healthcare, it all costs more. But my family's paycheck isn't going up. When I heard that Anne Kuster repeatedly failed to pay her property taxes while earning nearly $200,000 a year, I was shocked. Kuster's excuse?
Life is expensive.
Crop TV.